I'm ready. Okay, guys, welcome to the Rainbow Room. A bit of housekeeping. Like before, we do have to adhere to a code of conduct. So, don't make any assumptions. If you're unaware of someone's gender, please ask them. Have respect for others and refrain from any discriminatory and verbal abuse. Just be nice, in other words. All right. We'd like to welcome Rico. Rico is a writer, a director, and the race and equality lead at the British Film Institute. Rico, I've been looking forward to this. Anytime we have a chat, it's fantastic. And we're gonna start this. We're gonna start this off with Rico going in and talking about his own journey.
Perfect.
Cool.
Thank you. Cool. So hey everyone, I'm Rico Johnson Sinclair. My pronouns are he, they. For anyone who's visually impaired or anyone listening, I'm going to self-describe. So I am a black male with short hair, beard, septum piercing, wearing a black t-shirt, sat in a white room, looking all bougie. Yeah, I guess I'll start with who I am. So I'm currently the race equality lead for the British Film Institute. I am also a writer-director, a reluctant producer, and I run a queer film festival that takes place out of Birmingham called Sinclair that prioritises the perspectives of queer, trans and intersex people of colour, as well as volunteering some of my time to Fringe Queer Film Festival to programme queer film with their festival. So how did I get started out? I will start at the very beginning, I guess. So when I was younger, I come from like a single income, single mom, benefit household, low income. And there wasn't a lot to do in my house. There wasn't a lot to do. School didn't really challenge me at the time. So I used to like beg my mom to go and to the library and max out my library card and bring books back. And I used to just devour these books. I used to just like literally chain my way through them. And it got to a point where the rate that my mom could actually take me to the library, the capacity that she had was less than the time it took me to read the books. And so I would always get frustrated because I didn't have that distraction. I didn't have that thing to take my mind off my current situation, which was like obviously living in poverty, had an older brother who was, a younger brother who was severely autistic and nonverbal. And so the disability in the household made it difficult. And then an older sister as well. So that kind of made my home situation really complicated. And also just like starting to think about my identity and coming to terms with my identity privately. And so in that frustration that I couldn't get to the library quicker than I could read books, I started to emulate what I was reading. And in the end, just kind of wrote the book that I wanted to read. So I didn't write for anyone else. I wrote so I could read those stories back and actually enjoy them. And I could be transported to the exact world that I wanted to read. So I created these like short stories or like started these books with like, people with magical powers living in this paradise or this paradise, because that was what I wanted to read at the time. And so from that sparked my love for reading and writing, and especially writing, having the power to create worlds that lived in my imagination, but also having that power that can create stories for other people's imaginations too, and everyone interprets it differently, was a really great thing for me. So from there, and so I say my journey in film, it comes from my love of stories, because that's true. I didn't really, film is so inaccessible and it's so pricey that coming from a low income background, single income background, I never went to cinema. I went to cinema the first time when I was like 13 years old because my auntie took me. And it was to watch, I don't know if any of you remember the cartoon Recess that used to be on TV. So it was the movie version of that, and so the film itself wasn't great, but I do remember sitting there in a cinema. So I remember thinking, instead of it being all in my head and me making it up and me interpreting it, everyone was experiencing the same thing, and there was a sense of community there. Now for me, I'd been a bit of a loner and like hadn't really experienced a sense of community. Like I had lots of friends here, there, and everywhere. Like that felt like a community to me, which I guess later came into like me producing Sinclair and stuff, but I'll get to that. And so I came out at 13 years old. I came out in a very strange way. I was infatuated with this guy on the bus. And I was like, these are really innocent emotions, so I don't think there's anything wrong with this. Also, like in my household, like being gay just wasn't spoken about. So there was no like being gay is bad or being gay is good. It was just like, I didn't know. So I wrote a letter to this guy, and like said, yeah, tomorrow I'm going to give it to him. Tomorrow I'm going to give it to him. Now, either subconsciously or consciously, I was like, okay, I left that letter at home. I was still galvanized though. I went to school and I told him. The reaction wasn't great. But then when I also got home, I realized that my mom had found the letter, opened the letter, and that was the beginning of our discord. So from that moment on, we didn't get on at all. And that led to me leaving my family home at the age of 16. So I've been self-sufficient since the age of 16, having to be completely independent. I have been back a couple of times since for periods of time, but still I don't speak to the majority of my family. I speak to my sister and I speak to my aunt. So I say that because at that point in my life, I wasn't able to think about the long game. I wasn't able to think about where do I want my career to go. I had to think about survival. And being newly gay or being newly out, and the narratives around gay men, I thought the thing that I had to do was go and do hairdressing. What I heard, what I experienced. So I thought, oh, I'm gay, I better go and do hairdressing. So I went and did hairdressing for about 2 years, worked at Tony and Guy, like trained up, but for that like 2 years that I was working, like trainee hairdressers only get about £400 a month because they say the rest of your wage goes to your training. So finding it really difficult to struggle, having to top up my money with help from connections in the job centre and whatnot. And then finally got to a point where I was like, I'm not going to be happy if I continue doing this. So really spent the time to do research into like what I needed to do to be able to like develop, to learn, to go to higher education, to go to uni. So I went to college, I studied performing arts, and then from there I kind of decided that I wanted to go into film, but I made this really weird decision. So again, being from a low-income background, being Black and being conscious of being gay and Black, so I made a choice. I said that if I didn't get into what I perceived as the best arts university at that time, which was University of the Arts London, then I was going to study forensic science instead. So I applied for two universities for forensic science. I applied for 2 universities, one I applied to 1 university, production for live events and TV and media practice. Thankfully, I got into both. I got into both media practice and production for live events and TV. Otherwise, I'd be a forensic scientist now.
Oh, wow.
So from there, I guess I studied, well, again, that kind of fear of stability. I didn't choose production for live, I didn't choose media practice. I chose production for live events and TV because there's more jobs in production for live events than there are in media. And actually, I hadn't seen like anyone that looked like me, anyone that was openly queer and Black in that industry. So I was like, I'll pick the thing that I think I can get a job in. So I studied that for 3 years. And in my second year, I guess all of the trauma, like having to like come out at 13, being from a low income background, my family experiences, and then also being self-sufficient since the age of 16, and the amount of like time I spent in flight, fight or freeze, that I couldn't, because when you're in that place, you really can't like, the things that the reality that you live in is that every day is a bit of a struggle. Every day is about survival. None of it's about living or experiencing the world or anything. And so being in this situation where I was getting student loan and my housing was relatively secure, and I was in uni and I was studying, that's when like I had dealt with basically 10 years of trauma in one go and had a psychotic break, which basically means that I experienced auditory and visual hallucinations. So the way that presents is I have like between 4 and 5, depending on the level of anxiety, voices saying either derogatory or neutral things to me. So either horrible things or completely neutral things. And within that, when I'm over capacity or if I haven't slept enough, like I have to get my 8 hours, or if I am stressed, like really, really stressed, I'll have like shadows in my periphery, which are visual hallucinations. So, but when I had my psychotic break, it's nothing like it is now. Like I still experience auditory hallucinations and visual hallucinations to a much milder degree. But when I had it, when I had that psychotic break at that time, it really was like I couldn't function. The voices that I was experiencing were louder than the voices of people talking to me. And because there's added elements of paranoia within that, and like I was just trying to live like normally and ignore the fact that it was happening. I went to obviously I got care for it. I went to Lambeth Early Onset team in Lambeth, and they were great. But I was trying to, like, with my friends and with the people I was spending time with, I was still trying to pretend I was normal, and had that ever conscious fear that by telling them that what was wrong, I'd end up alone, and being alone and having a psychotic break felt like it was more than I could bear. So I tried to kind of emulate what it was like to be a normal human. And I am a normal human, obviously, with or without psychosis. I am human. But at that time, because of the paranoia and because of the way that they present themselves, often when I was having conversations with my friends, it was almost like I was hearing part of what they were saying and part of what my internal dialogue was saying, and it completely changed the context of what they were saying. So I found that when I was spending time with my friends, I couldn't really be around them because I kept thinking that they were saying horrible things to my face. The funniest thing is, all of that changed the moment that I said to myself, because for those 6 months, I was like, I want to get better. I want to get better. I just want to be well. And the moment that I shifted my thinking and said to myself, like, you might always be like this, so it's about time you learn how to live like this. The sound of the voices, the volume of the voices went down, the severity of the auditory, the visual hallucinations reduced. And so it gave me that leeway to kind of start to think about how I built a future around this. And so I moved back to Birmingham, and I said to myself, because I was getting employment support allowance at that time, because I was technically disabled because of my psychotic break and my psychosis, and said to myself, I'm going to spend the next year volunteering to see if I can work, because for me it was about testing the water. And so for that year, I spent my time volunteering at 17 different arts organizations in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And to the point where at the end of that year, I was literally like basically working, volunteering full time. So Monday to Friday, office hours, I was volunteering. And that's when I said to myself, right, I can do this. I can make something of myself. I can follow a normal career, or rather a perceived normal career. And so I, at that point, applied for this course from Independent Cinema Office called FEDS, which stands for Film Exhibition, Distribution and Sales. And I got a place on that course. So I was placed at Flatpack Film Festival in Birmingham. And they taught me, along with the course, taught me everything I needed to know about running a festival. So I kind of landed in this midway place where I was like, queer film needs to be shown, queer Black film needs to be shown, because I need to see my perspective, and there's probably like other Black people, other people of color in Birmingham that want to see themselves reflected on screen. So if it's not there, I'm just going to build it. Like if it doesn't exist in Birmingham, then I'm just going to make it. And so I built Cinecube, and Cinecube started off as a community cinema operating every 2 months. We just showed films. And then over the process of like, it's in its 5th year now. So over the process of 5 years, it grew into a festival, a 2-day to 4-day festival that takes place once a year in Birmingham. Alongside that, I was also doing, because so Cinecube was like the love. And then I did something that was like the moneymaker alongside that for stability. So the moneymaker was always working with social change organizations, or social change initiatives. So worked for Birmingham LGBT on a campaign called Aging with Pride that looked at older LGBT people and the specific issues that they face. So going into social housing and having to go back into the closet because they're scared of abuse, or trans people having to go into social care, and especially with neurodegenerative diseases, having to deal with parents that are saying that they should detransition, even though they want to live as a trans person. All while thinking about what film means to me, and all while being like, I'm in my heart, I'm still a writer. Like, I'm still a writer. I want to get back to writing. I had to go the long way around to figure out how this industry works, how it all fits together, what's my place in it, how do I get in? So I used my experience in a film exhibition, which is very one specific part of the film industry. So there's exhibition, distribution, sales, and there's production. Production is making, exhibition is showing, distribution is where the film goes, and sales is how the film sells. So each part of that is part of the film chain, and that's the way it works. So I use my knowledge and involvement in exhibition to figure out the rest of the steps, to figure out how I get to production. What is sales and why do they exist? What is distribution and why does that exist? How it all fits together. And luckily, was able to produce my first short film. So that was through BFI Network, which I'll talk a little bit more about later because it's part of what I want to go through. And then from there, I just kind of did a lot of work in Birmingham around film, got really engaged with the community, like made that film Sweet Mother, which I produced through BFI Network, and then ended up getting the job at BFI as a race equality lead. So that brings me to where I am now. So yeah, it's been a journey. So yeah, like, and also I think like, so the funny thing is about psychosis, right, is at the time it was the worst thing ever, but in getting psychosis and being diagnosed with psychosis, essentially what I had to do was I had to completely dismantle my brain and the way that I thought my brain was, the ways that I saw myself as a person, my personality, and rebuild it with an adult perspective. So all of the trauma that I'd experienced and not dealt with, I had to unpack. And all of the kind of like internalized racism, internalized homophobia, the way I was treated by a majority white gay community, the way I was treated by the Black community, the way it all fit together, I had to reanalyze it with like a grown-up brain, with like an adult brain. Like, this is the way that things are. So that's what I experienced. It was a product of this. It wasn't a product of like, the world doesn't owe me anything. The world hasn't been horrible to me. This is the world. I just didn't look at it properly. And that allowed me to put things into perspective, which really helped me in the long run. I think if I didn't have that breakdown, if I didn't have a psychotic break, then I wouldn't be as conscious as I am now. I wouldn't really see the world around me. And I think I'd have a lot more barriers. I wouldn't be working in the areas that I'm working in. I would have given up by now because I wouldn't have had that resilience. By overcoming psychosis, it ingrained such a resilience in me that now I'm basically like, oh, that doesn't really matter. I've been through worse. And that trauma really helps me, and like, especially in the job that I'm in at the moment, where I'm tackling race equality in a predominantly white organization in a quite systemically racist industry. And I'm still able to do that work and have that resilience because I'm like, well, being in an industry where I'm being paid to challenge them is nothing compared to having to support myself since the age of 16 and having to think about sustainability and having an actual psychotic break. So like, whatever world throws at me now, I think I'm ready for it.
Oh, mate. I nearly said a bad word, so I better keep my gob shut.
So yeah, I think there are challenges to this industry, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about like the things that I know, the bits of knowledge that I can impart on everyone, starting with, I guess, filmmaking. So like, how do you get from an idea to a screen? I'll talk about the way that it's most likely that you'll get into the industry. If you are between 16 and 19, or 16 and 25 even, then the best way for you to get through the in my opinion, the best way for you to get into the industry in the UK is to go through the BFI. And I'm not saying that because I work there. I'm saying it's that because it's one of the main funders of independent film in the UK. And if you ever want, even if you want to get into studio film, which is like, your Fast and your Furiouses or your Saws, you have to go through independent film because that's where you cut your teeth in the industry. That's where you get your experience, because in independent film. Yeah.
Can I just cut you? Can you go through that thing that we were speaking about before? You mentioned it to me the other day. So it was the studio, the different types. Can you say a bit about that, please?
Sure.
The independent. Yeah.
So you've got like your independent film, and independent film is usually like a lower budget, and it doesn't work with a studio or a production company per se. It works with your producer and your director. And so that is the kind of the starting stage. But first, before you get to independent feature film, so your long film, you'll be starting on shorts, because that is where you kind of enter the industry, kind of get to know what you're doing, kind of play around with different scenes. So guerrilla film, then short film, then independent film, and then independent film, you'll be moving towards studio film. So you'll be moving towards like a bigger budget. You'll be working with a studio or a larger production company. That's where you kind of get involved with your Netflix and your Amazon Primes even, who will like fund your film and get it made. Or you'll move to a studio base, and then a lot of people that end up in studio film move to America because that's where the real money you can make is. The UK's film industry is really great for independent film. It's not so great for studio, unless studios from America are coming over to the UK to shoot in certain locations. So for example, you know, Kingsman was shot in Birmingham, Ready Player One, part of it was shot in Birmingham. So that means part of Birmingham's crew were working on those productions, but just because those productions chose to come to Birmingham. Usually if you want to have a director producer credit on a studio film, you'll be working out of America. And so that's kind of top line.
Can I ask another question? Sorry, just to add in.
So
see, when you're a guerrilla and you're at this guerrilla period, right? Do you recommend that people find a team, or do you think, kind of?
Yes, it's about finding a team, and yes, it's about getting experience. It's both. And when you find your team, and you find your team, you hit that beautiful sweet spot, and you're like, yes, these are the people that I'm going to work with from now on. But don't try and get to that place in your first production. If you're doing your first guerrilla production, don't say to yourself like, oh yeah, I worked really well with these people, I think I'm going to keep them around. Your guerrilla films and your short films are the times for you to switch it out. But it's also like, again, coming from a place of like, you know, race equality and like thinking about equity, it's also about making sure that you're paying your dues to like a community. If someone took a chance on you and you end up making films in the industry, then it's also, I think, your responsibility to open the door for someone else. So like, for example, someone took a chance on me, I became a producer of a BFI funded film, and it was great. It was a great experience. But before that, the only producer experience I had was events, and there was a lot of transferable skills there. And that gave me my first opportunity to get to where I am now as the writer director, which is where I always wanted to be, the writer part of the industry. So when I produced Prey, which is the film I'm working on at the moment as writer director, I made sure that a certain percentage of the roles that I had went to people in Birmingham, because we don't get enough opportunities here in Birmingham, but also people that were coming into the role for the first time. So our like set designer that was the first time in their role. Same costume, first time in the role.
So in the guerrilla phase, you know, you're buying your new phones, you're buying your new lenses. Cool, that makes sense. You're testing your craft. But when you start to move into independent phase, because I know a lot of people do this, they're going out, they're spending £1,000, £2,000, and they've got to upgrade, that's another 1,000.
Yeah.
Do you think people should be, you know, paying for their sets, paying for their movies, putting them on the YouTubes, or do you think there's a space for people, or should people be applying for funds, or I don't know?
I think if you're doing guerrilla, then definitely it's okay to pay for your own productions, but we're talking like a grand tops. Like when you're doing a guerrilla, like guerrilla literally means trying to, like, you're shooting guerrilla style, you're going into offices when it's less busy, and you're shooting in offices very quickly before anyone can catch you. Again, not advocating for illegal things, just saying like this is the way that some filmmakers make their films.
Talking of the guerrilla phase and going into the independent phase and the studio phase, people by now, you know, you saying change the characters and stuff. What about people that, let me just be blunt, do you go for professional actors, or do you feel like you can develop actors? What is it that you choose in a person? Because, you know, like you could see someone with like a really, you know, the mean face that fits the mean character, and it's like, do you work with people and develop them, or is it a thing where you're just looking for the whole thing all at once?
It depends. Like I would also I would obviously advocate for working with actors to develop them. I work with everyone to develop them. I don't think about my own practice. I think about other people's. But in some instances, you just don't have that time. You don't have the luxury. Like, for example, in Prey, like I had time to prepare before I got into production. During that period of time, there wouldn't have been time for me to train someone or develop someone at a greater stage. Then hopefully you've already developed those actors to a stage where they can come along with you without that development. But sometimes you'll just have to pick actors from Spotlight. You'll have to work with actors that have been in other stuff and you know that they can pull through, or you choose actors that closely relate to the experience that you're writing. So if you're writing from the perspective of someone that's been through homelessness, then cast someone that's experienced homelessness, like, because they'll have a lived experience that's ingrained in that role, and that will always come through on screen.
Cool. Just another one as well. What do you think? Yeah, what's your views on improv? Like, just
I don't like just improv because I think it's too chaotic to streamline a film. You'll find if you've got like a day to shoot like a very complex scene, you do improv, you'll have to do those takes several times to get exactly what you want. And so I would say if you're going to do improv, leave space for it in the script. So for example, like if you've got a scene with a group of friends sitting around a table talking, like have the scene start, you know, about 30 seconds earlier, and then the 30 seconds earlier can be the improv. So then if the improv is no good, you can cut to the beginning of the script. If the improv is good, you can leave it in. So there is space for improv, but I tend not to be like, right, I'm going to get all these people into this location. The film is about this. I'm just going to have them improvise it. I can't do that.
Oh, cool. Wow. All right, let me go again, because I've just got questions for days and days. I'm hoping you guys have got some questions. Right, so I understand how to get a film going now, right? Mm-hmm. You know, I've got this film, right? What I'm not understanding is like, you know, what do I do next? Is it a thing where when I'm making a film, yeah, should I have like been a part of a film festival society and like how do we connect these dots? So now I've written the script. Yes, Rico, please. Cool. Grace us with that.
Okay, I'll take you from beginning to end. If you're like a first-time independent filmmaker, so if you're doing a short, first thing you need to do is find yourself a producer who will do all of that for you. Right? If you're a writer-director, set yourself up with a really great producer. If you're a producer, then you would have that knowledge anyway if you're coming to a producer slot. But it is also your job as producers to convince people that this film is important, that it's something they should invest in or believe in. That is your job as a producer. So if you're going to funders, it's your job to be like, this film may not do well commercially, because independent film doesn't do well commercially generally, but may not do well commercially, but it says something about society. It's also developing this filmmaker, this writer-director who's made an amazing script and will go on to be, you know, commercially viable, which they will go on to make, you know, independent film for 2 million that goes to box office and sells for like, you know, 15, and then also goes through distribution and maybe gets picked up by Netflix for like 1 million. Like, you have to convince people to invest in, they're not investing in your film, not really. When you're at that stage, they're investing in you as a person. Like, they think, and that's the way the BFI goes, that's the way BBC Films goes, that's why a lot of these people that are funding film, that are publicly funded, especially because they're funded by the public, are investing in you as a person.
I wanted to pipe in if I could, Rico. Obviously, because a lot of this it's very similar, but it's slightly in a different aspect for the angle I'm coming with. For me personally, I'm at that stage where I did a lot of guerrilla stuff over the past few years. I've done a lot of, you know, I've concentrated more on my acting work. I've been fortunate enough to get a decent credits in UK as well as internationally. And I've written a few scripts, and one of them is a TV series. And well, it's very different, right? As in the approach, as I imagine. Obviously, with TV, where do you go to the point once you've got your team? You know, you've got a lot of faces of people on board. How do you go about towards getting a producer and sort of seeking that funding, basically?
Yeah, it's one of the most complex relationship navigations that you do when you create films, because ultimately you're not just finding a producer, you're finding a producer that doesn't see you as a product but rather sees you as people. So for that, it is about going out there and finding people that closely resonate to what you're trying to do, and that doesn't always mean finding a producer that's in film or in TV. Sometimes it means just finding a person that has the skills to produce. But like, if you're in Birmingham and you've got someone and you're making something that's like queer, and then you've got someone that's closely tied to the queer community and has the ability to really bring it together from the queer community, maybe has like some events producer experience, then they're also going to be suitable for you to produce your film, and it's not going to go against you. If you've got a team of really experienced makers, like filmmakers, TV makers, and you've got an inexperienced producer, then you attach an exec producer who's experienced to drive them through. Yeah, give yourself at least 6 months to find a producer for the thing that you want to create, and like really, and sometimes it will happen quicker than that. Sometimes you'll find someone in a month, but give yourself 6 months. And then if you're not finding anyone in 6 months, I'd reach out to organizations like the BFI network, who exist to network, to connect people with other makers in the city, in the region, and work together.
Sorry, Rico, right. Can I just put a quick question? Can you just break down some of the specific components of what a producer actually does?
So what I'll do is I'll give you the skeleton crew. So when it comes to, like, if we're doing a short film now, what are the different roles in a short film? And so really you're looking at writer or director. So someone that writes the scripts. If you are if the person that wrote the script isn't the director, then often you'll have to pay a fee for them to give you the script. So in short films, that's probably going to be about £600-700 for them to be like, right, we're having your script and then we own your script now. So then you have the director who's in charge of direction and anything on set, also in charge of pulling together the crew so they all have the same vision. So if you think about it like creatively, the director has all creative ownership over the direction of the film. Not sole creative ownership, but complete creative ownership. The producer is in charge of applying for funding, of managing that budget, of making sure everyone's there on time, making sure everyone's there and happy when they're on set. And also after the film, they're in charge of driving it through the edit. They're in charge of, they own the film. So sometimes you have split rights between the writer, director and the producer. So like I'll have, as writer producer, I'll have 40% of any income from the film, and the producer will have 60% of all the income for the film. The rights for that film are held by them. So any film festivals that are coming in, any cinemas that want to show the film, they'll often go to the producer, and the producer will be like, yes, I'll send you the DCP. Yes, I'll send you the video file. So that's the producer's role.
Sorry, I have to add in here because it seems like, all right, so what about if you just want to be a producer in this life? Because it actually seems like it's really hard to become a producer. What does a producer look like in Guerrilla Land, and how do you become a producer? Because it seems like you either have to be, you know, this person already to kind of get those producer roles. So even me, for instance, when I kind of started doing this producing, it was kind of just doing everything that kind of led me to being a producer. What about you, Rico? How do you, you know, someone that wants to just be a producer, how do they go all the way up? Where do they start? What does it look like?
I think that you start by making connections with the industry. Like with my journey, it was about where I went, who I spoke to, the network I made, because that's ultimately what directors are looking at you for. Like the fact that I work in exhibition means that I know a lot about film festivals. I know a lot about the exhibition chain. I know a lot about the cinemas that would program the specific types of work. I know a lot about licensing. I know a lot about how to get a film into various different places. That's really part of the thing, because ultimately a producer is the person that sells a film. So when you're in Guerrilla Land, when you're making guerrilla films, being a producer is actually really easy. All you need to do is find a director, a writer, a director, and then you need to start making those connections. If you're making guerrilla films, it's about like reaching out to students, reaching out to people that may one day be a part of the industry. And even at that level, those people will be part of the industry one day. So if you're starting a career as a producer, when you get to another level, those people might be, you know, like producers, they might be the crew, below the line crew on Oscar nominated or, you know, BAFTA nominated films. The power as a producer is your network and your knowledge. And so you have to make sure you're always building that. And so that will bring you up different levels. Like you'll be producer for, you know, your first BFI network short. And then before you know it, you'll be producer of like your first feature. But you've also got like, you know, some really up and coming actors like Florence Pugh at the beginning of her career or something. And then Florence Pugh goes on to do something really amazing. People start to look at Florence Pugh's first film, see your producer and give you a kind of like, oh, come up to this level and do this. So it really is like it's a journey, and it is about who you know.
Cool. All right. Another one. So when you're making film, this is all to do with the filmmaking stuff. Because obviously, you know, we got a passion for making film, but at the same time, you know, we want to get paid for it. It's not all, you know what I mean? It's not all fun and games. Are you making film because, you know, there's a message, or is it because, like, you know, it's what's needed, it's ticking the box now? You know, for instance, there's a pot of funds here for £10 million and it's for animation. Or is it like, no, actually, I'm going to make this film because, like, why are people making films now? Well, not people, but your own personal experience. What type of films are you making and why are you making them?
I also have a strategic brain about what funding pots are out there, how I get funding, where I get funding from. And so, like, ideally, I mean, this current film that I'm working on, which is about racially motivated sexual assault, is something that I've had a lot of friends talk about, had a lot of kind of perspectives in that specific thing, and thought like a lot of the Black community aren't talking about this. They aren't talking about, like, you know, there are some men out there that are away with it because there's so much shame in the Black community, because we don't want to be seen as effeminate, or we don't want to be seen as vulnerable. And so I created this film to start a dialogue, because film is persuasive. Like, seeing, again, going back to what I said about like being in that cinema and watching Recess and being like, this is a shared community experience. It's why I built Cinecube, because I wanted to create a safe space for queer, trans, and intersex people of color to enjoy something that wasn't revolving around drink or alcohol or anything like that. I wanted to create a space where people could see stories, but also a space where white people could come in, not be centered, but they could come in and like really kind of see a different perspective on screen and understand a different perspective on screen. And I think that carries through into my work. I choose films that show parts of our community that need to be shown, bits that need to be shown, a light needs to be shone on them. But yeah, so I think it is. But I think it's about both. If you've got one eye on the funding pots that are out there, and then one eye on what you want to write, what you want to bring, it's fine. But I don't do films that I don't believe in or have a personal stake in, because I wouldn't ever be able. Like, making films is hard.
No, that makes sense. I've just got one more question.
Yeah.
So somebody that, you know, they've done really, because I know a lot of people like this as well. Somebody, you know, they're doing really fantastic in guerrilla film now. You know, they've maybe got together some independent films together, because I know a lot of people that have just done independent films, and literally, I'm one of them, you know, spent hundreds, thousands of pounds on film, putting them on YouTube. We go to how we connect with people, because I find it extremely hard. I think I literally, I don't want to get into that. That's another story for another day. That's when we're having drinks, right? But how do you find people? Honestly, like, is it like go just searching online and putting film events, or like, how do you be a part of this society? What's the first step, Rico?
Yeah, it depends on where you are. Like,
sorry, and to add in, like, if we wanted to go film, like someone that, you know, is aspiring to go to the film festival, sorry, just to add, because I know it's current right now, you know, how would we get in?
If you're in London, then the Film London mailing list will give you everything you need to know about film activity going on in London. It's really comprehensive. And that will be like events where you can meet other people working in film. Like, they do these things called the Exhibitors Breakfast, where you can go and spend breakfast with a lot of the exhibitors in London. And that's people from the Prince Charles, people from the Picture House, people from BFI, all sitting down to talk about what they're doing. So like, it's a great place to network. So yeah, if you join the Film London mailing list, that will give you everything you need to know about things in London. Similarly, if you like in Birmingham, Film Hub Midlands has a mailing list that will show you anything that's going on happening in Midlands. There are mailing lists that bring all that stuff together, but in its essence, it is about always being out there. Go to events, even if you feel uncomfortable, you're going on your own, go to those events. Like, be okay with like talking to people, because ultimately, like, it's terrible, but industry works on who you know.
Rico, just because what ending with free top filmmaking tips.
Cool. I would say be bold. I didn't follow this advice and found myself doing something that felt safe, when actually, especially if you're at the beginning of your film journey, your voices are really kind of a set. So if you're a filmmaker that really likes interesting angles, for example, if you like to shoot scenes where the camera's going around in a circle and that becomes your signature, that's really hard to do as your signature in independent film, or, you know, when you start to make shorts, because then you have a budget to adhere to and you won't write in your budget, and it becomes very difficult to navigate. If you're testing the waters, test the waters, take it as far as you can, do things that are a little bit crazy, do things that are a little bit interesting, and start to become really good at that. Like, that's my personal opinion, because that's the stuff I want to see as someone that watches, because I watch like 630 films a year. I watch one in the morning, one in the afternoon, or one in the evening. And so if at this point, like most of the people in this industry, we've watched so much that what's really going to grab our attention is the interesting stuff that we've never seen before. And you start to create that at the very beginning of the journey. Yeah. So 3, okay. What else would I say? Once you have found your team, properly remunerate your team. Like, do not start to ask your team to do favors every single time, because it's a really quick way to lose them. Like, if you may start out with your team, and when you start to do guerrilla films, it will, like, your crew below the line and above the line, you will be asking them to do loads of favors. When you start to have budget to do things, make sure you're paying them. Like, just make sure you're paying them and constantly paying them, because if you're not, they're going to go to places where they have, because while you're getting experience, they're also getting experience, and they can join another team and then you would have lost them. Remuneration
thing is a big thing. We actually had a nice conversation with someone from the BFI network, your friend Cara, so thanks for that. Now, this is one of the barriers to entries for working class filmmakers. You don't have that cushion of being able to work for nothing. Do you know what I mean? You know, you've got, and you mentioned this at the start with you getting in, you've got to justify what you do in life, because you need to pay the bills, you need to make the money. You don't have any sort of cushion. So and we've all had it where someone, their third thing down the line, where they spent money on the equipment and telling you they want you to work for nothing.
You've always got to, like, it's the hustle. Like, it is about like, for me, I've always had a full-time job alongside doing any of this. When I made a festival, I had a full-time job. When I'm making films at the moment, I have a full-time job. Like, it is about, like, and you shouldn't be doing it forever, but while you're getting that experience and letting your name be known, and you become, like, decent at being a filmmaker, and then ready to, like, join the industry fully, like, you need to be conscious that you always need to have things that make you stable. And that's not the same for like some of us can have, like, parents that we can stay at that will support us in this journey. Some of us have, like, networks that will support us in this journey. Some of us come from money and just can afford to join the film industry without worrying about how much money they make, but that's not a lot of our experiences, right? So being realistic and pragmatic, like, make it work for you. If you've got a full-time job and your full-time job is office hours, like, even if it kills your soul and you don't like it very much, you can bring that creativity in your weekend. You can have half a Saturday, half a Sunday, maybe 2 evenings during the week where you're working on the film stuff, and then when it comes to production, be like, right, well, I can do production, but I can do production on weekends only. I can book 1 day of leave. So a 3-day short film shoot could be Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then you're back in work on Tuesday. Yes, you're going to be exhausted until the following weekend, but it's worth it because you're doing the thing you love. But never, ever sacrifice your stability and your survival for anything. So never, ever, if you don't have any idea if you're going to make enough money out of it, or don't even have kind of like a thought process to how you're going to survive and be a filmmaker, then you always need to have a backup plan, whether that's a part-time job or a full-time job while you're doing it. And there will become a time where you, even if you're not there at the moment, where you start to think, wait, I'm getting quite a few requests now, both commercial requests and also narrative film. I might be able to quit my job and do this full time. The last thing, it's all about the story in the UK. It is all about what's written, the story that you're creating. And so ultimately, in the UK film industry, it's about your story. If your story is weak, but your aesthetic is strong, there's still only a certain amount that film can go. But if your story is really strong, even if your aesthetic's weak, it can still be a successful film.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Oh my God, Rico, you've been absolutely fabulous, as always. Thank you so much. I can't wait for another chat, I tell you.
Yes, yeah, me too.
Yeah, no, it's been amazing.
Thank you very much for your time today, Rico. Yeah, it'd be lovely if we could sit down and have a proper chat face to face.
Yes.
This virtual reality world we're living in.
But yeah,
nice, but yeah.
Fantastic.
All the time. Nice, Rico. Thank you so much. Thanks again, man. Good session.
Thank you all. Thank you all, guys.
Yeah.
Happy Sunday, y'all. Take care.
Happy Sunday. See you later.